This presentation is on Redefining Space, a journey through class, culture, and social geography in Thailand. This past summer, I had the opportunity to teach English to grade 5 students in Thailand. When I signed up for this trip, I expected an adventure, new food, a different culture, and the challenge of teaching in a foreign country. But what I didn't expect was how much it would change the way I see the world, especially my understanding of space and class. I lived in a small tourist free area of Bangkok, where the only foreigners were me and the few people that I traveled with. It wasn't the Thailand most tourists see. There were no resorts, no bustling street markets catering to Westerners, and no familiar comforts, just everyday life unfolding in a way that was completely different than what I was used to. At first, I felt like an outsider, hyper aware of how unfamiliar everything was. The way people interacted, how the streets were used, even the structures of homes. But as time went on, I began to notice something deeper. Space in Thailand felt different. Before this experience, I had never really thought about how space is socially constructed, or how class influences the way we interact with it. In Canada, space functions in a way that felt natural to me. Certain neighborhoods are for certain people, and public spaces, though technically open for all, often feel unspokenly divided by class. But in Thailand, I saw something different. Space wasn't just about where people lived or how the city was designed, it was about how space was used, shared, and valued. I noticed that people in Thailand navigated space with a sense of connection and gratitude. The streets weren't just places to pass through, they were extensions of people's homes, where children played, where neighbors gathered, and where meals were shared. There was a fluidity to space that I hadn't seen before. It was communal, shared, and open, rather than rigid and segmented by status. This made me think about Canada. Here, space is deeply tied to class. Where people live, what spaces they have access to, are all shaped by wealth and status. Space is a way to display privilege through expensive homes, exclusive clubs, or even how people present themselves in public. Even public spaces can feel restrictive. Certain restaurants, parks, or neighborhoods feel unwelcoming to those who don't fit a particular socioeconomic background. But in Thailand, space wasn't defined by exclusion or wealth. Instead, it was about relationships, about being present, and about making do with what you had. Coming back home, I started to look at space differently. I noticed how in Canada we isolate ourselves in individual homes, how social interactions are often planned rather than spontaneous, and how wealth determines access to the most desirable places. I started paying attention to the invisible boundaries that divide people, the unspoken rules about where we belong and where we don't. It made me wonder, what if we thought about space differently? What if, instead of using it to separate, we used it to bring people together? Through this reflection, I came to understand that space isn't neutral. It carries meaning, shaped by the values of a society. In Canada, space reinforces class divisions, creating invisible boundaries between those who have access and those who do not. But in Thailand, space felt like something shared, something that fostered connection rather than separation. This shift in my perspective forced me to rethink my own relationship with space. Before this assignment, I hadn't realized how much space shapes our daily lives. I'd never questioned why space in Canada is structured the way it is, or how it impacts our sense of belonging. My experience in Thailand opened my eyes to the fact that space isn't just something we move through, it's something we create, something that is always changing, and something that can either divide us or bring us together. After seeing an alternative way of living, I know which version of space I want to be part of.